Hey everybody, welcome to the DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always, my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today we're going to go into part 2 of the pre-production process, specifically tips on what we found over the past 11 movies and how you can actually get more tactical in what you're doing to set yourself up for the pre-production process. Now, in part 1, we did discuss kind of the overall mindset and just how you should look at this process and why it's super important. In this episode, we want to kind of go into just more detail of what that looks like when it comes to what you're actually doing. And as always, be sure to take a look at all of our links online. Specifically, our Discord community is going to be the #1 spot for us because we make movies for our fans, with our fans. And if you want to be part of that cool process, all you got to do is join our community. So, as I kind of mentioned, I think a good way to segue is just recap the last episode and how going through the pre-production process and going from 0 to 1 is one of the most important things you can do. So do you want to just kind of briefly touch on just how much we really value this pre-production process and how committed we are, because we see it's the best way to easily set yourself up for success and, more importantly, make sure your movie gets made?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the most important part of the process. I think if the amount of time that you put into pre-production is going to pay dividends when you're actually making a feature. Making a feature just by itself is extremely difficult. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you have scenes that you don't know how to actually shoot them, if you don't know how to block actors properly, and if your pop scares are not hitting, you're going to have a hard time. Like most of our movies are on 5 to 8 minute sequences. So there's an little intro hook, some tension building, and then we end with like a pop scare or something, a larger event happening. And then we have a downbeat and we go into the next sequence. Well, you can miss on one of those and you'll be all right. If you miss on 2, people are going to turn your movie off. It's going to be boring. You're going to have pacing issues. And I know this because we've had a lot of movies that missed on 2 or 3 beats and people turn it off. The first movie we did, Gone, missed on almost all the beats. So a lot of that stuff could have been solved by just doing simple pre-production. And, I'm going to sit here and I'll beat this drum all day. If you're not doing pre-production, you're going to have a really hard time getting your movie completed. And if you do happen to get it completed, it's going to have a lot of problems.
Definitely. And I mean, it's one of those things where, like, pre-production, if you look at it on the grand scheme of things, it's just practice. We have a side marketing business that we end up working on, and it's given us a ton of practice just making and editing and working on films and footage. And I think it's kind of similar in the filmmaking industry, but that's practice as well too. So all of these things are kind of adding up, but specifically anything you can do for the feature that you're making to practice those upbeats or those scenes is going to really set you up for success, because again, you're just so limited when it comes to the time and what you're able to do when you're actually in the production process. So, I think where I kind of want to start is something we also talked about in the first episode. Is my biggest recommendation to any filmmaker is do everything yourself. I think the misconception in this industry is that, you need a producer and a casting agent and all of these things. And what that ends up happening is, one, your budget gets much, much higher to the levels of the Hollywood experience, but you don't even have any kind of personal experience in the sense of going through the process. Because the first place I'm going to start is just kind of, looking for actors, getting casting, working with them, understanding that process. So, what's kind of your thoughts on what you're missing out with, again, not only with the experience, but the touch points that you have versus just, showing up on set and meeting someone for the first time. So, do you think going through this process by yourself in the sense of doing everything, you start seeing it with the more tactical items of, we're going to talk about acting and getting actors now?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you start to notice a lot of the little things. And I think a lot of the little things is how you make a really good movie. And those little things only become apparent when you're, writing things, you're writing your own movies, you're directing your own movies, and you're editing your own movies. I mean, just for example, for editing, just how you get in and out of scenes is so crucial. And that could be, you could put that stuff in the beginning. I'm writing how I get in and out of scenes in the screenplay now. And that'll make your movies flow a lot better. The first 8 movies that we did were very blocky. It felt like we were just stacking scenes on top of each other because that's what we were doing. You get around that issue by just writing in clever ways to make scenes transition, whether it's a cut point, whether it's a montage, just little ways to make your movie flow a little bit better. So you don't really notice that unless you're sitting there editing movies and you're like, wow, man, this is just, these scenes aren't cutting together. And, that's stuff that I've learned from, and now we include in our screenplays. Same thing with when I'm, shooting movies, just the lens choice that I use now, the movement of the camera, it's more character motivation based. Where before I was just trying to just make sure the framing was correct. And that just comes from, the hours that I was working with editing. Every once in a while you get a shot and you're like, wow, that's a really, really good shot. And you'll make like a mental note to actually do that again, or a physical note when I'm actually doing a shot list. I will actually, be like, all right, this is the shot that I want in there, or I'll write that shot into the screenplay. And a lot of these little things, they are not apparent unless you're doing all three phases of the filmmaking process.
Yeah, and that's a huge advantage. So, kind of talking to the first thing, I think we'll look at it in a two-way manner. One, what we do, and then two, what we would recommend. Because again, look at us when we first started, we did hire out for all of these positions for the most part. But let's go ahead and talk about just like, getting a DP, cinematography, and how in the pre-production process. I think the first thing I want to highlight is in the pre-production process, your most critical thing when it comes to working with a cinematographer or a DP, you need to make sure they're technically sound and audio sound. So I think what I would recommend for any indie production, if you're doing it yourself, make sure you film things and test it out and see. If you're working with a DP, make sure, even if it's just a basic, dialogue scene, if it's just a few basic things, at least understand and ensure that things are in focus, things are good audio, things are looking fine. Don't take any kind of reel for granted. I would say it's critical that you spend at least a day working with whoever you're working with as a DP and the audio team, just to make sure that you guys get a technically sound product. Because not having a technically sound product, regardless of everything else you put into the movie, makes your movie unusable. So, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
So when I talk about pre-production and the amount of time that I invest in pre-production, that's just pre-production with myself. I'm basically the screenwriter, the director, and the editor. And especially the DP is going to be the biggest person, in your crew, as far as like making sure you guys are on the same page while I'm shooting my stuff. So it's just mainly for my mental sanity to make sure that I understand what to do. If I had a crew, if I had a DP, if I had an audio guy, I would be doubling or tripling the amount of pre-production that I've done. I really make sure, especially with the DP, that the look that we're going for, the lighting that we're going for, and the shot selection that we're going for is exactly what I want. And you have to be very, very clear about what you want. If you don't know what you want, there's no way you're going to be able to tell the DP what you want. So you have to be very clear with your vision, and you have to be very clear to the DP, and you have to make sure the DP understands what you want. And if you don't have that level of communication in pre-production, you're not going to have that level of communication on set, and you guys are going to have two different movies. As far as the audio guy, you got to make sure that the audio is clean. That's the biggest thing. I think the biggest mistake that indie filmmakers make is they think that anybody can be a boom operator, that their friend can be a boom operator, that their brother can be a boom operator. And that is not the case. The boom operator is literally one of the most valuable people on set. It's one of the most difficult jobs. And it's just, people take it for granted. So really make sure, if I was going to spend money on one person, it would really be the audio guy, making sure you're getting really good audio. As far as video wise and, technically sound stuff, a lot of people will allow for bad video. The minute it gets bad audio, people just turn it off. And I've seen it firsthand with a lot of our stuff before. We had a lot of audio issues. I had to go back and re-edit Into the Forest to try and get it uploaded on another platform. And just listening to the stuff that we got on our last three features to that movie, it was very difficult for me to listen to. And I spent a lot of time trying to fix up a lot of those issues. So I would say, man, if you have extra people in there, as far as like a DP and audio guy, you really got to put your pre-production in with those guys, just to make sure you're getting clean audio, you're getting clean video, and you guys are all on the same page of what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's just getting to the technical level of it. And I think one thing to highlight that's crazy for us to look at now, but just is such a fact of the industry. There's so many people that literally they don't see what they got until they're in post production. And I don't think we can even kind of fathom that situation where we're at now. But before, when we even started, I can totally see how it happens. But there's a ton of people who get a crew together, get a team together, and they don't actually witness that final project because they don't have someone on set editing like we do have. I mean, we have a consistent check for what we're filming every single time we have a scene, in the sense of me on set going through the editing process. There's a ton of indie filmmakers who, because they don't do a pre-production process, because they don't have an on-set editor, the first time they look at this footage is in post-production. And real quick, do you want to highlight how that is probably the most terrifying thing you could possibly think of right now, in the sense of setting yourself up for an editing process?
I mean, it's still terrifying to this day. So I'm going through the shapeshifter right now, and I'm going scene by scene. And I'm just like, please let there not be any audio issues. Please let this cut together perfectly. And all our stuff does not have audio issues. It does not have video issues. It cuts together perfectly. And one of the reasons I know that is because Kel went through it while we were on set, while we were doing it live, to make sure that things cut together perfectly. And if you don't have an on-set editor, man, going through that is going to be just super nerve-wracking, because if you get one scene that doesn't cut together properly, you're going to either have to do pickups or your movie is going to just be kind of messed up. So, I mean, it's difficult. And as far as sound goes, like in the murder house, we had the lav mic drop off the lead actress a few times, just fell down her shirt. And because I'm listening to two channels, I have channel 1 and channel 2 in my headphones, it's hard to hear that stuff. And we were able to recover it. We had other takes. It wasn't a big time issue, but all it takes is one actor not to turn on their mic, one actor to have the mic fall off, and that whole scene could be done, and you have no idea that you had that issue at all until you get to post production. And at that point, you're gonna have to do a voiceover, which is extremely difficult to do, or you're gonna have to reshoot. So, I mean, if you don't have someone on site editing, making sure that the audio you're getting is good, and the video that you're getting is good, once again, you're just adding to the mounting pressure that this movie does not get made, or if it does get made, it's going to have a lot of technical issues.
Yeah, and again, number one, secure your technical abilities. Again, even like it is so worth it. The amount of money you spend to have them come out just to do some pre-production stuff is going to be, like you said, 10x worth having someone on set and working with them. And again, this is just protect yourself as a filmmaker. If you're the producer, if it's your capital on the line here, you need to protect your assets, in the sense that, you might get someone who this isn't their main project. This is just a gig to them, and they're just going through the numbers and they missed a few things, and now you have a ruined movie. And I think that happens all the time. We've even seen some of our indie films where the DP quits halfway through it, because again, these are personal things that can come up in the indie making process. It's not easy. Tensions can be high. Things can end up happening, and then before you know it, you're just left out on an island with nothing. And pre-production is a way to understand if you actually work well with the person. I mean, that's hugely critical. One thing we take advantage of is because, me and my brother have worked on so many things and we know each other so well. There's an entire team of chemistry that we have that's just not there. Your DP shows up late. Your DP does all of these things. And this is any crew person that you're hiring, any team that you build out. If you're building a team out, if it's not you, these are all variables and factors that, again, you at least have one opportunity. If we have pre-production, if someone shows up late, bam, we now know something about you. It's 100% just part of the process. So you want to talk about real quickly, again, we're a little bit unique in what we push, where you have to do everything yourself. But just from what we understood in the beginning, when we're building out a different team, again, all of our finished products, amazing teams, but what would you learn from the little nuances of at least working with someone beforehand that will give you an idea going into production? Is this person going to be late? And this can also segue into acting, where, just getting in touch with someone. So do you want to talk about how the interpersonal relationships are also going to be something you can test in pre-production?
Yeah, I mean, you really want to be working with people who, number one, are passionate about the project and that are interested in the project. Because, like what Kel said before, is you have a lot of people who just want a paycheck. They want to go in there, they want to do the bare minimum to, get that paycheck, and they want to leave. And, there's so much creativity that is involved on these sets that you really can't afford to have someone like that. So you have to kind of flesh that stuff out, before time in pre-production to make sure that, A, this person is reliable, because if you don't have an actor show up, or if you don't have one of your crewmates show up on your set, you could lose a whole day, and you just can't afford to lose a day on an indie set. It's just your whole production is going to be gone. So you have to make sure the person's trustworthy. You got to make sure the person, they actually want to do this, that they want to give it their all, that this is something that they want to do. And you want to make sure that they understand what they're doing, that they are actually providing value to your set. And that's the biggest thing, is to just really make sure that, they can come in and do all the stuff that they're saying. And then finally, I always look for, do I think that this person's able to handle an indie movie shoot? And I say that because a lot of people are like, oh, I could stay up 8 days. I'm used to working 16-hour days. That doesn't bother me at all. I can do that. In my experience, there's very, very few people who can do that. They usually start to break on day 2 or 3. And if they break and they walk off set, then you're completely screwed. So you have to really make sure that, this person can get the job done. When you're holding a boom mic for 16 hours a day, it gets exhausting. When you're holding a camera for 16 hours a day, it gets exhausting. And, if you're not passionate about the project, it's very easy to be like, all right, like, I'm not going to put my full effort into this shot, or I don't like this shot, so I'm just gonna kind of wing it or something like that, or I'm not going to hold the boom mic where it should be because my arms are tired. You've really got to flesh all that stuff out. As a director, as a producer, this is your job, to assemble your team, to assemble your crew, and make sure that everybody's going to give it 100%. And you would think that most people would give it 100%. Having the opportunity to work on a feature film is a huge milestone in anyone's career. In my experience, there's not a lot of people, after day 1 or 2, their brain just gets tired. Physically, they get mentally exhausted, and their brain's like, hey, just get out of this situation, get your paycheck, and move on. And once that starts to happen in people's brains, the quality of your production is going to drop dramatically. So you really have to be careful with the people that you choose.
And again, I think that's a good thing to highlight. Like, any kind of suspicions you have in pre-productions can flush that out, because, people are different on day 5 and 6 and 7. I mean, it's just natural. Again, I don't blame anyone who's been on a set. And this goes back to something. I mean, imagine you're an actor on set, you're not an indie set, their director didn't do any pre-production, a massive special effects scene goes wrong, and now you're just like, I want to get out of here. I don't blame that mentality and that attitude when it comes to it. And you have to understand that on the other side of the stick as well, too. you know this is something where it is a paycheck, and it's up to you to make it an experience by doing the pre-production. But in the same sense, you need to protect yourself from any glaring issues like that. It's a very nuanced subject, in the sense of it goes both ways of an indie film production, and pre-production is such a great way to buffer any of those issues sparking up. And one thing I want to kind of hop into now, when we go into pre-production, I think I just want to discuss when it's like our locations and just like our actors and everything. We're pretty much open to what that looks like, so it kind of helps us solidify in that process and gives us flexibility. But I think a good thing to kind of just talk about when we're getting into more tactical things, I think the first thing you need to understand about our scripts is they're a blueprint, and pre-production solidifies those. So let's kind of talk about, we start getting a location and we'll change it to the location, or we start getting actors and we'll almost kind of, to some degree, look to mold it with the actors that we're working with.
Yeah, and I think that's just a way to get organic, like an organic experience from the movie. When I'm writing characters, usually my main character can be interchanged from a female lead to a male lead. And I don't really, keep it, I'm not like dead set on one or the other. I think that adds, like, if both a male and a female could have the same dialogue, I think it kind of adds like value to the script. I think it's kind of a cool aspect. Obviously their backstories would change and the motivations would change, but I'm trying to just find the best character, male or female, or the best actor, male or female, for that character. And once again, the script is just, it's a blueprint, it's a guideline, it's not the gospel. I am completely open to, whoever I think is the best fit for the role can, get the role. And I'm open to interpretation. I'm open to changing the characters. And it's one thing that we do in pre-production. Once we get the actors lined up, I go through the script. I make a lot of changes just based on that actor's tonality, the actor's body language, how they kind of, portray themselves. And that just gets you a more natural and organic screenplay. And I think it'll get you a much better performance from the actors. And all this stuff comes in just working with them and, communicating what you're looking for. And then they kind of put their own spin on things. As far as like locations go, we're just limited by our resources. So, we're in Florida. We have to shoot around here. Usually I'm not picky on locations. It's just whatever is the best fit. And that's just beggars can't be choosers at this point. When we start to get a larger budget, will I spend more time on proper location scouting and really trying to find a place that fits the script? Yeah, probably. But where we're at right now, the location, as long as it fits like a general idea of what I'm going for, we'll usually just move forward with it. And I don't think the location adds a ton of value to your screenplay and your overall movie. Now, would a really, really cool location add some production value? Yes. But overall, I think we're just really focusing on performance and just making sure the movie's technically sound. So I would just use what you got, use what you have available, and, use your creativity in other ways as an indie filmmaker.
Yeah, it's something where if you can already start showing compromise in the pre-production, it's going to set you up. Just being part of the indie filmmaking community and just what's out there and listening to things and watching just different behind the scenes, you'll see people be like, oh, it needs to have this house or it needs to have this thing. And I think one thing, since we've been through the process, is it kind of goes back to in the writing process, we understand we need to, have interchangeable parts or be flexible. So it's just, again, kind of having that mindset drift into the pre-production process. So, with that being said, now that you've been through so many different parts of the process, do you want to kind of walk through, specifically, you've mentioned it before, but when we're looking for casting and actors, kind of what's the process you're looking for, and more importantly, as an indie filmmaker, what do you think you should be looking for in your actors?
Yeah, so it really comes down to two things. The first is, can they actually act, and can they act natural? So anybody can act scared, angry, really sad. The pretty much primal emotions are very easy to act. What I'm looking for is the downbeats. The downbeats are the most crucial parts of your movie, and they have to act naturally. You have to be able to just have a conversation and make it look and feel natural. And I think a lot of actors are good at, the primal emotions. They really, really struggle with the downbeats and just having a natural performance and just being able to relax. So usually when we do casting, I'll have two sets of sides. I'll have one side with, usually it's the climax of the movie, a very emotionally tense scene, to see how well they do with that. And then I'll give them something that's just a conversation. And a lot of the times the conversation one is just over the top. It's very dramatic. And unfortunately, like, that is the performance that, takes the viewer out of movies, and, they don't feel that it's a natural performance. So we can't really, go with that actor. And the second thing that I'm looking for is, when I actually talk to the actor, are they passionate about this project? Are they 100% going to devote their time and energy into making this the best performance, that they could possibly get? When I talk to actors, I'm actively trying to persuade them not to do the project. I'm saying, look, this is going to be very, very difficult. You're going to be up for 16 hours straight. It's going to be in the woods. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be nasty stuff. You're going to get dirty. You're going to get bloody. You're going to be running around for 16 hours. This is mentally, physically exhausting. And it is no fun at all. Like, you're going to do this for 8 days. You're not going to have 1 ounce of fun. And if at any point in this conversation they hesitate, I look for somebody else, because I want that person who's like, yes, this sounds great. I'm ready. I'm down. I understand exactly what you're telling me, and let's make a movie. I will give it my 100%. If there's any hesitation at all, I think you have to look at other actors.
I think that's a good point to just drive home real quickly because I think I see the opposite a lot for most indie filmmakers where they're almost trying to chase the talent and be like, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be great. You know, it's going to be huge. I feel like we really try and set expectations in the sense that we've been through it now. But I think in the pre-production process, a good tip here, and I kind of want you to, see if you agree on this is, when working with your actors and talent, really try and get it across to them the setup of it. I think one thing we had, even when the girl in cabin 13, when people hear movie set and filmmaking and all of that stuff, there's Hollywood, which is one complete beast, and then there's indie filmmaking. And I think you really need to brace them for what the process is, because if they have been on a Netflix set, if they have been on one of those sets, that is night and day difference. So I think you need to embrace what you are, because again, if you mislead, you might find the wrong person. And it's not even misleading. You might not be saying anything, but we try and drive the point home of what the production is going to be like from an indie scale versus something else. So you want to kind of talk about that in detail?
Yeah, you have to be, 100% honest. If anything, like I oversell it as far as like, don't do this. And I'm like, listen, this is me, myself, and we're going to a cabin and we're going to film, and there's going to be a limited amount of crew. You're going to have a lot, you're going to have a lot of action stuff. You're going to be moving around. And, you have to understand that. And I always remember one of the actors telling me when we showed up to the girl in cabin 13, she was surprised that I was just me and like a couple other people, because, with our social media presence, with the quality of movies that we put out, they look like higher budget stuff with a large crew. And that's not the case. And, I make it very clear. It's like, look, it's just me, myself, and my brother doing this kind of stuff. We're a skeleton crew. We'll take care of you. You'll be well fed. You'll be well watered. But, this is what it is. It's going to be very gritty and intense, but it's going to be a fun experience. And you have to be very clear about, what you're trying to accomplish with them. If there's anything as far as like, that could make them uncomfortable, or some kind of dangerous scene or kind of fighting scene, you have to make that very, very clear. Do not hide that. I've heard horror stories of directors who show up on set and tell the actress that, they have a nude scene, and they had never talked about doing the nude scene, in pre-production. And you just can't do that to your actors. Anytime we have any kind of special effects scene, I make it very clear to the actor exactly what we're doing. We'll do pre-production stuff. If there's any kind of fight scene, we'll do pre-production stuff. We'll make sure the actors are completely safe with it. The last movie, we had a lot of torch scenes, and I made sure the actress was very, very comfortable with the torch at all times, as she understood there was torch scenes, that is fire, there is a dangerous element to it. But I brought that up way earlier in the process. There should be no surprises at all for the actors when they get on set. If anything, I'm overly cautious, and a lot of actors are like, that's not a problem. Why are you making such a big deal of this? Because I just want to cover all bases, so there are no surprises when the actors come on set.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then, I think one thing I just want to touch on, because we're going through the tactical, process of working with the actors, just the benefit of now what we're looking at with the table reads and delivering the lines, just for flushing out the dialogue. In the writing process, we always mention the dialogue is often the hardest part, especially downbeats and natural dialogue and how the character comes together. And having table reads or just working on that. And more importantly, I kind of want to touch on how we give them a bit of a flexibility to say that's not how I would sound, or what does this sound like? And I think that pre-production process really sets up the actors for understanding their scene, understanding their dialogue, because then when they're on set, they can be like, oh, we talked about this. More importantly, this is my dialogue. And they take the ownership of the character, and that's so critical again for keeping them invested in the project.
Yeah, the easiest way to get natural dialogue is to let the actors work on the dialogue. As long as the main beats of what the character is trying to say, as far as like their motivations and where they're trying to go with the conversation, their wants and their needs is being met, let the actor, change it up, make it sound like they would actually talk. And I think that's just a real easy way to get natural flowing dialogue. I think a lot of actors have a lot of dialogue that they would never say, so they kind of freeze up on it. It's difficult for them to say, and you get like kind of a robotic performance. We've seen it in our past movies. So I think working with them's, definitely crucial. Usually in the screenwriting phase, I will do dialogue with somebody else that's not an actor to go through the script and try and clean up just the small difficult sentences or things don't flow very well. And then I will do a Zoom meeting with the actor to just go over the dialogue once with me reading to them. And then, we'll go over the dialogue in a giant table read. And each time you fix things, you find things that come up, difficult lines that are, being said, ways to change things. There's a little bit of improv going on. And that's like the organic performance you want in pre-production, because you can take that feedback. I'm like, wow, that is a much better way to say that. It's much more clear. Let me change the script. And, I'm always looking to tailor the script to the actor. I think the more you do that and give the actor ownership, I think the actors appreciate that. We're just going to get a much better performance if this is what you're looking to do, as opposed to being like, this is the dialogue, this is a line, you say it like I tell you to say it.
Exactly. Adding that into the pre-production process also gives you insight, because you don't honestly know until you hear it, how it's going to really kind of play out there. So that's super critical as well. I think now when we're looking at it, we'll kind of wrap it into some of the more tactical things that you need to have, your shot lists, your things that are going to basically be mandatory. Because again, being over prepared is the best thing you can possibly do for a set, because coming up with things on fly is going to be super critical in the sense of it's always going to happen. So, do you want to kind of go through the process of how we look at now, breaking down days by how many actors you're having, what scenes are going to happen, and also how we set it up now? So, how we're looking to kind of get the hard scenes done, have a nice or easy one there, but just the overall shot list and the idea and concept when you're making one, and what you would recommend to any filmmaker out there.
Well, I think one of the hardest things for new filmmakers to understand is how to actually schedule things properly, and how much time goes into each shot, into each setup. Unless you've actively done this before and worked on film sets, it's very difficult for you to gauge how long things are going to take. It just really depends on setting up and breaking down equipment, setting up lights, how difficult the technical, or how technically difficult the shot is, how many actors you're going to need in the shot. And I'm still like, we're still coming up, and I'm being, surprised on some shots take way longer than I anticipated. Some are just much easier, but I'm getting a better idea of how to schedule movies. And honestly, I think one of the most valuable skills that I possess is the ability to break down a script and schedule it properly. And that just only comes with experience. So, my gut would be to try and find someone, who is in the film industry that can help you break down a script and schedule it properly. If not, then stack your hardest scenes first and your easiest scenes at the end. So you always start hard first, and you don't want to start hard. It's going to go against your gut instinct. Nobody wants to do the hard stuff, let alone do the hard stuff first. But if you can get all the hard scenes done, you'll continually build momentum, and you'll just have a much easier shoot, and you'll have a much better chance of getting your movie actually completed.
Exactly. It really is something that, again, you're just trying to set yourself up to get through the process of completing a movie, getting things done, getting things finalized. And I think one thing that we're doing now, and I still think we can all honestly look at doing more, it is something I usually bring up, is just kind of how can you increase the production value with getting certain items, getting all of the props and stuff you need? Because I think one thing that can happen that people don't account for is if you don't have this prop, or if you don't have this settled, or if you don't have something there, that you're going to be set up. So, I mean, I think another big thing that we do before any set is just basically saying, what is every single prop that we need for this movie? What's the wardrobe? What's all of these items? Because again, the fact, and I would say every single day I run to the store for something still. And it's just, again, it could be food, it could be something, it could be one or two items. And that's part of the job. You have PAs for this job specifically, but we consolidate it in the sense where it's almost like, hey, once a day we'll go out, we'll get anything that we possibly need. But I think it's something that can happen on a much greater scale than for us. It's just kind of one or two things to keep things humming along at the speed we have it.
Yeah, you have to make sure you have your props. So, I mean, thank God for Amazon, because, I could just order all the stuff and make an Excel list and just kind of cross them off. And even then, we still find things as we're shooting that we're just missing. They're just small little things that, we just never thought of when we made the script. So I think that, that's important to just make sure you have multiple people going through the screenplay and creating their own lists and then comparing the lists and then trying to figure out, what you need. But you really have to have attention to detail and make sure you have all your props, because if you're missing something, on set, it could really be detrimental to your shoot and set you back, a good couple hours before someone could run to the store and pick it up.
Exactly. I mean, that just is critical. It can be things like batteries, testing all of your equipment, all of those things, make sure you have it all lined up, because really going into this process, any little thing just derails it. It's just snowballs, makes things harder. You don't get the movie to where you need it to be. And that's how movies, die. So really make sure you're going through that process, giving yourself as much benefit of the doubt when it comes to all the items that you have and what you really, really need. And also just know that you're going to basically have to do that on set as well, too. Things are going to come up. So with that being said, as we're narrowing in on our launch date, when it comes to just starting the production and the first day of it, I think one thing that I've noticed personally is, we're starting to get to the point where like we kind of have like a nice oiled package to present to the team and whatnot. I think we've always had that, but maybe we've had it like a day or two before and then kind of been like, hey, here you go. Where I feel like now it's like, hello, everyone, like here's everything that's going on. Here's your shot list. Here's the finalized script. I've already spoke with you multiple times. So I think one of the things with having multiple interactions with the entire team, again, the team is me and my brother for the most part when it comes to the onset production, but also the actors and anyone there. But having those multiple touch points allows you to then, maybe a week or so before the final shoot, just get everyone on that same page. Because I think one thing indie filmmakers don't understand is like, if you're not in contact with like your entire team, things happen. Yeah, this is your movie shoot. This is the thing that's occupying all of your time. Oh, this is my one gig that I'm doing out here for someone else. Oh, this is my one scene I need to do for someone else. Oh, that's right, I'm doing special effects. So, do you kind of want to talk about how you do want to continue to stay on top of mind, and at least, not just the day before, but weeks before, few days before, because people have lives and lives affect if you're going to actually have people show up.
Yeah, once I locked down the actors, I don't think from the time I locked down the actors to the time we start shooting, the first shoot date, I don't think there's more than 48 hours that go by without me having some kind of contact or touch with the actors, whether that's a Zoom meeting, or a schedule update, or just an email, or I'm texting them about wardrobe. I'm in constant communication with all of them because number one, it'll flesh out any kind of questions that they have. Number two, it keeps them involved in, understanding the process. But number three, like what Kel said, if something does pop up or one of them starts to hesitate, or there could be some kind of scheduling conflict, it'll be fleshed out now, because if I'm not talking to them for 2 weeks, they're not going to reach out, or they might just kind of hide it. Or if there's some kind of hesitation on the shoot, they're not going to try and confront me right away. So it's your job to just keep everyone on the same page. And that's pretty much what I do. Every 3 or 4 days, I send them my newest script revision. I'm working with them on wardrobe, and I'm putting together the schedule. And, are they reading all this stuff in depth? Probably not. But I think just seeing them and having these touches is super beneficial. It shows that you're working, you're committed to the project, and just keeps everyone kind of motivated and looking forward to starting the shoot.
I mean, I think you hit on a good point there that I just kind of want to touch on real quick. Is it'll give you a sense, the more you work with someone, the more, and again, just like in anything, when we're looking for actors, we're looking for people who are consistent or whatnot, and little things, not getting back to you after a few texts, things like that, they start to actually allow you to almost be like, hey, I think we might need to watch out for so-and-so. And I'm not saying that, again, everyone on our teams, we have all of our movies made. They've done a fantastic job, but this is a real life issue that happens on sets all the time. And you need to try to almost be gathering as much information from your actors and your team at all points in time. Because again, one person late, one person not showing up, all of these things derail your movie. Your movie costs a lot of money every second. And what are you going to do? You don't really have any repercussions in the sense of, hey, you cost us the day of shooting. There's nothing you can do. And you really want to almost take advantage of every little interaction you have, because then it allows you, like I said, when we go on to set, would you kind of say that you have just a gut feeling about what can go wrong more so than what can go right? And the reason for it is because you have the pre-production, and you've mentioned it before. You really think at first movie making is just not doing the wrong things more so than doing the right things.
Yeah, I remember like the first movie we did Gone, and really even The Invited, both those movies, I was just a child of summer. I thought it'd be easy. You just go, you turn the camera on, you get some, acting performances, and you edit it and it'll be done. It's just super easy process. Like, what could possibly go wrong? And then when we finished The Invited, I was like, oh, this is a lot more difficult than I anticipated. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. And with each movie, I honestly get more nervous and more pessimistic because I've seen all the issues that could possibly go wrong. And I think that just comes with experience. Where when I first started, I just didn't know that, deleting your footage was an actual thing, that, a camera firmware updating mid shoot is a thing, or like a light breaking, or someone dropping a lens on the ground. Like, I just didn't think those were things that actually happened. And so now I'm super nervous going to any shoot. Each day, every hour is super stressful. The only time I can really relax is when I finally get that last shot. Um, but I look at that as a good thing because I'm actively looking out for problems. I'm trying to problem solve or preempt or stop mistakes from happening. So, like, we have extra batteries, we have extra equipment, any kind of thing that could absolutely decimate a shoot. We usually have two of them. So, I'm looking at the worst case scenario, but when you have that kind of mindset, I think it does prevent a lot of problems. And if a problem does come up and does arise, the fact that I've dealt with it before, gives me confidence that, I could solve it and we can move on without, losing too much time.
That's the big thing with it again. It's just the mindset has shifted from we can do everything to like everything can go wrong. And I really don't think you get that until you've been through the process of making a movie. Again, the pre-production process is really going to be the one area that you need to try and alleviate all of the things that you can do. And I think until you go through the process, you don't understand that pre-production is preventing everything from going wrong. I think you just have a mindset as an indie filmmaker that everything's going to go right. And, pre-production, you don't really need it. You could just do this and you push it off there. So, as we're wrapping up this episode, do you kind of have one, last warning in the sense that, guys, pre-production, it is better to have things go wrong in pre-production and cancel your shoot than it is to go into a shoot. Just because, again, I go back to kind of how I ended the last episode, which is I see it far too often. People skip the pre-production process. They focus in raising their money, getting all of their money, doing something that never comes to the light of day. And if you force yourself to have an extra hard pre-production and things fail in pre-production to the point where you're not confident enough, that is a massive success. That is probably one of the best successes you can have ever, compared to going into production, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode. So, is that something you kind of want to warn for any indie filmmaker out there potentially going through this process?
Yeah, I mean, the more stuff you can flesh out in pre-production, the better you're going to be. Now, I'm sure, like, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure there's a movie that's going to depend on one scene. And I'm like, listen, this scene is make or break in this movie, and we're going to go to pre-production. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And we'll probably have to scrap the whole idea, or at least devote a lot of time to try and figure out how to actually make it work. But I think as we get, better creatively, that situation might come up more, where we'll start to build around a movie around one scene or one character or one kind of sequence. And we go to pre-production, the actors just, we're not feeling it. It doesn't feel like they're going to be able to get it done. Or we go there and the sequence is just boring. It's not paced well, or like even like a monster, the monster just doesn't look scary. And, to give you an example, on the Shapeshifter movie that we just did, I wish we had done a little bit more pre-production with the monster, because, there's some special effects stuff and some just practical effects that I think we could have added to make him look a little bit better. Now we're in a good position because we could pick this stuff up and it's not a huge problem. But I mean, really, the pre-production of the monster of that movie was maybe about 30 to 45 minutes. So it really wasn't as fleshed out as it possibly could have been. And it was in a dark environment. And I wish I would have done pre-production with the monster in multiple different lighting environments, because this would have been fleshed out earlier and we wouldn't have to do pickups. So like all that stuff, your goal of pre-production is to find problems, is to find things that are issues. Your goal of pre-production is not to be like, oh man, we killed that, can't wait to do it. Yeah, that's good, but really, you really want to be looking for almost like testing your ship to make sure it can float. Essentially, you want to look and find any kind of leaks or any kind of holes that are in, the script that you just haven't, seen, or you haven't come to light yet, so that you can either address them or make the changes necessary so that when you actually go to production, you don't have those problems pop up.
Again, that's the biggest thing that we stress, the biggest thing that we kind of mention over and over again is now is your time to just try and avoid as much of the pitfalls that happen in the production process. In the next episodes, we're going to go ahead and do what we've been doing in these past 2 series on the writing process and pre-production. We're going to go ahead and talk about production, the overview process, how you should kind of have your mindset for it, and then more tactical tips about it. As always, though, be sure to take a look at our links online. Girl in Cabin 13, our newest feature, is up on Tubi for free, but you really want to look at joining our Discord channel, because we make movies with our fans, for our fans. If you want to be part of that action, that is going to be the place you want to be. So until then, have a good one.